Some people keep their loved ones' memories alive with stories and photos or by planting a tree. But one woman kept her parents' memories alive by using their phones to text people that they were just out of town and by giving away their belongings as gifts. All the while, the couple was mummifying in the at-home mausoleum she made for them. This is the story of Virginia McCullough, the English artist who entombed her parents in their house and lived with their bodies. Hi friends, I'm Katie, and this is Katie Does Crime. Thank you for joining me for the first time if you're new here. I'm a Midwesterner who now lives in New York City, putting my writing degree to use by researching true crime cases that interest me, and hopefully you. And hello to the usual rapscallions and reprobates. Please consider subscribing or joining me on Patreon if you'd like to hear more true crime stories. On September 13th, 2023, police in the charming country town of Chelmsford, northeast of London, started receiving calls about the welfare of two people in their 70s. Their doctors said they should have been coming in for appointments and to pick up medication. The authorities began an investigation and were led to believe that the couple, John and Lois McCullough, were no longer alive. 2 days later, their daughter, 35-year-old Virginia McCullough, was arrested and then charged in their deaths. There was very little known about what happened to them, only that they were probably murdered between August 2018 and September 2023, which is quite a long block of time. But I guess it's not completely strange that no one could quite pin down when the couple disappeared. Neighbors said that John and Lois were very aloof and old-fashioned, like a couple out of the 1950s. One said John would just keep his head down when you said hello and cross the road in a hurry. Someone used the word scurrying. Another neighbor said that they kept to themselves, and another said they were pretty self-contained. But people who worked in shops nearby said they were nice and just normal. John had been a university business studies lecturer, and the couple had 5 grown daughters. Only Virginia, a self-proclaimed artist known to neighbors as Ginny, had been back living with them for several years. People would sometimes ask where her parents had gone because this was a small town where people knew their neighbors. Virginia told them her mom and dad were traveling or were sick. Sometimes she said they only came to town at night to avoid the nasty townspeople who would talk about them. She told one shop employee nearby that they've moved to the seaside before the pandemic. And this story checked out in a way because that had always been their dream. But it turns out Virginia had killed them. And she had been using their phones to text people as if they were alive, including one of her sisters who got a message the day after they were killed that said they were going to the seaside for a week. Virginia sometimes called the doctor and her sister and pretended to be her mom. She canceled plans with family because John and Lois had supposedly extended their holiday. She bought birthday cards online and had messages pre-printed inside to send to her siblings from their parents. She did what she needed to do to keep people away and buy herself more time. One neighbor said Virginia was pleasant and had a funny, dark sense of humor, but that was about the only nice thing anyone had to say. People in town called her a little odd and a little too chatty. She'd come into the shops and tell random people about her problems whether they asked or cared. She was diagnosed as paranoid and autistic, but they probably didn't know that. She just seemed like a lonely pest at best and an irrational, compulsive liar at worst. No one knew what to believe when it seemed like she was making up stories and illnesses all of the time. She once told a shop worker that she was pregnant, but she clearly had a fake bump and fake hospital paperwork. A neighbor said she would descend on you when she wanted to talk and wouldn't let you go. She would see neighbors leave their houses and come out to chat like she'd been watching and waiting. She would hold people hostage with her conversations, and most of what she said seemed made up. But people said she was generous in a way, bringing coffee to retail employees or leaving Chinese takeout on a neighbor's porch. She left a note for a neighbor when she brought over a holiday tree. She left a note for him offering to draw his dog. She put a wrapped steak through his mail slot. It was sort of like she was trying to buy friends, just in the most awkward way. No one could remember seeing Virginia's parents since August 2018, but no one thought she was a threat. And I guess she knew she was flying under the radar, and it made her bold. In August 2023, the police visited the house when Virginia said she had been assaulted in her back garden. Some people believe the attack really happened, and some think she was just testing the waters to see what she could get away with. An officer took her statement, unaware of what was hiding upstairs and in the back study. But nothing seemed to indicate anything was amiss at the house, and since the supposed crime hadn't taken place inside, there was no search conducted. But a month later, it suddenly made sense why Virginia, her home, and everything in it always stank of perfume. John's doctor finally had enough of him not coming in for checkups and called the authorities, and the police contacted Virginia. She said her parents would be back in town the following month, but things were evidently too suspicious at that point. The police forced their way into the McCullough home, and as she was being arrested, Virginia told officers, "I did know that this would kind of come eventually. It's proper that I serve my punishment. Cheer up, at least you've got the bad guy." They asked if there was anything on the property they should be aware of, and she said almost in a whisper, "My dad's body is in there." She told them his remains were in the study by the back door, and they asked about her mom. She said, "A little bit more complicated. Upstairs, there are about 5 wardrobes. It's behind the bed, but back, next to the sink. It's the second one." John's and Lois's bodies were both severely decomposed. Some sources call them mummified. Lois had stab wounds to the chest, but it was unclear just from looking at John's body how he had died. It would later be revealed that he had been poisoned with prescription meds. Virginia put a cocktail of crushed drugs in his drinks one night, his prescription meds and her own that she'd been not taking and saving up. She tried to give her mom a deadly dose of sleeping pills too, but Lois didn't finish her drink that night. When Virginia woke up the next morning and her dad was dead but her mom wasn't, she had to go to Plan B. She put on gardening gloves and went into her mom's bedroom, where Lois was listening to music on the radio. Virginia said she looked so innocent, just lying on her bed with her back to the wall. But she knew what she had to do so her mom wouldn't find out what she'd done to her dad. She struck her mom with a hammer, but it didn't kill her. Lois turned over and asked, "What are you doing?" Virginia said she didn't want her mom to suffer. She had wanted her to die peacefully like her dad, but her mom didn't really drink. So she stabbed her mom with a knife 8 times. The weapon was still upstairs under the stairs when police searched the house. She said it had taken some time for her to build up the gumption to do it, but she did do it, and then she took Lois's hand and kissed it. In the following days, Virginia used her dad's credit card to buy gloves and sleeping bags, building blocks, cement, sand, a stepladder, and Gorilla Tape. She stuffed John's body in his bedroom in a sleeping bag with 11 layers of plastic and other material over him to contain the smell. She made a tomb around him with blocks. She covered the tomb with blankets, pictures, and paintings. She put Lois in plastic sheeting and a sleeping bag and sealed her in a bedroom wardrobe with tape and blocks. Prosecutors called it a homemade mausoleum. When the police came to the house, Lois's headboard was still in her bedroom, stained with blood. In July 2024, Virginia showed no emotion at her plea hearing by video link. She pleaded guilty and said she killed her parents in June 2019, but couldn't remember the exact date. But what was clear was that she had lived with the bodies for 4 years. John would have been 70 when he died, and Lois was 71. 36-year-old Virginia was given a sentence of life in prison with a minimum of 36 years before she's eligible for parole. Prosecutors believe her motive was the fraud she'd been committing, which started while John and Lois were still alive. She used her parents' credit cards and her dad's teacher's pension to steal about 150,000 pounds from them, or about 190,000 US dollars. She opened credit cards in their names and ran up huge bills. She begged them for loans. She said she had a job as a web designer and pretended to go into an office sometimes, but she said her company had been hacked, so she wasn't getting paid. In reality, she had once had a bartending job, but had been unemployed for years since then. Virginia spent over 20,000 pounds of their money on online gambling. She made up paperwork saying her parents were getting a payout from their payment protection insurance because they couldn't pay their credit card bills. But when her lies became too much to handle, she killed the couple to ease her burden. She had been thinking of doing it since March 2019. She said her parents weren't the easiest to live with and had been abusive to her because they'd been smacked around themselves as kids. Virginia said her mom was a happiness hoover, meaning she sucked up all the joy. Virginia's lawyer said her client suffered as the sole caregiver for these people who had physical and mental health issues themselves, that her life was not straightforward. But some of her sisters said these were quote-unquote lies and a disgusting misrepresentation of our family. They wrote statements to the court about their devastation over the lost time with their parents and the haunting thoughts about whether or not John and Lois had suffered. But I mean this with the most respect, they also apparently hadn't seen their parents in years, so there must be more to the story. Now, a year after Virginia's guilty plea, her eldest sister says that although she won't be visiting Virginia in prison, she forgives her. She said, "I have forgiven her for what she's done. I'm not drinking other people's poison." Now, the interesting thing to me is that this sister left home in 1997 and then became completely estranged from her parents in 2018 because of her dad's drinking and her mom's controlling behavior. She says she's felt shame at times because she walked away, but her mom had anxiety, agoraphobia, and OCD, and her dad would down a bottle of wine in 10 or 11 minutes and then send her off to buy whiskey for him because he couldn't stop. She said, "I thought I must be to blame. I tried to save them, but Dad was a violent alcoholic. They wouldn't help themselves. I will never forget them. I loved them, but I didn't like them." When Virginia was growing up, she and her sisters would be made fun of for their clothes and their upbringing. She was called Smelly Ginny. The prosecutor in her case said social services had been involved with the family after Lois punished one of the daughters for wetting the bed. Not that this is any excuse for what Virginia did to them, but I can see what her lawyer meant about things not being straightforward. A criminologist told the Mirror that parricide, the killing of a parent, involves a complex mix of psychological, emotional, and situational factors. She said there may be long-standing family conflicts, intense feelings of betrayal or abuse, or a deep sense of frustration stemming from a perceived lack of autonomy. She said that Virginia may have murdered her dad to take back power, while she may have killed her mom more violently because of a need for retribution over the unresolved conflict or pain in their relationship. Virginia didn't spend her parents' money on anything extravagant or luxurious, just day-to-day living. We have to remember that Virginia was autistic, and maybe she felt like it was a black and white choice between putting up with her parents or killing them. But some of the things she said just make you shudder. When describing beating her mom with a hammer, she said it was like someone badly playing the xylophone. It was willy-nilly. Family said John was a caring and hardworking man with a passion for educating and writing. He loved golf, snooker, and making his kids laugh. They described Lois as kind, caring, and thoughtful, with a particular love for her grandchildren. She had pen pals for decades around the world and enjoyed history and the royal family. John and Lois loved taking walks together and hoped to retire to the seaside. Some of their other daughters said, "Our mom and dad are forever in our hearts and are loved and missed beyond any measure." But one of them described their parents as functional rather than affectionate. Of course, John and Lois didn't deserve to be killed, but it sounds like maybe Virginia should have distanced herself from them like her sisters did. A new documentary about this case called Confessions of a Parent Killer will air on Paramount Plus starting on June 12th. And as always, please let me know what you think about this case in the comments. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm just a true crime fan like you are, and I really appreciate you taking a chance on me. Please like and subscribe to my channel if you like spending this time together. I would be so appreciative. Until next time, I'm Katie, and this has been Katie Does Crime.